So there are two documents, two websites I would like you to visit when you are back. You are going to receive this, so you may not want to take notes on what I'm presenting now. I'm going to send it to you electronically, so you receive it under the electronic format. So there are two websites I advise you to visit. OHCHR, this is the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and the other one is UN Women, because these are the two major agencies which have responsibility to deal with women issues. One with women issues per se, UN Women, and the other one, OHCHR, is responsible for making sure that women are treated on an equal footing as men. So the whole issue, the discussion around gender equality. And OHCHR has a key role because it's a norm-setting institution. That is, they create law. Are you all lawyers?
No, politician.
Political sciences. Okay.
Studying political science.
Okay. No, that's fine. Okay, for political scientists also, you should know that norms are essential if you want to make people abide by some minimum standards. You have to regulate the society, and the only way of regulating is establishing norms. And OHCHR is responsible for establishing international human rights norms, and everybody has to abide by these norms. The other documents that you see down, you have the CEDAW Convention. Are you familiar with it? The CEDAW Convention is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you, most probably, how many of you are, I would say, very fluent in English? All of you fluent normally? Okay, so do you want documents? There are some documents I have the Arab version, the Arabic version, others the English version.
English.
Okay.
Both, why not?
Okay, so I'll see, because on the instruments, they are on the website, you have them in Arabic also. But the other documents, I'm not sure we have them in Arabic already. The resolution, for sure, we may have it in Arabic. Okay, you see the CEDAW Convention. The second one is a resolution that establishes that the Human Rights Council, have you visited the council?
Not yet.
But you will.
Inshallah.
Okay, so the Human Rights Council is the body which is there to monitor and to follow up the way in which government comply with their obligations in regard to human rights issues. And this mechanism adopted this resolution 630, which says that in all the work being done by human rights mechanisms, it should be made sure that a gender perspective is reflected. Which means what? It means that everything that is done within the human rights framework should show how much decisions that are going to be made would affect women and men, but in a different way. Because if you put together and you apply the same rules to people who are different, there will be a gap. So you have to make sure that the weaker persons receives more advantage or is treated in a more favorable way, so as to bring that person to leverage that person up to the level of the one who is in a better or in a stronger position. So that's the purpose of the resolution. And in the work, if you read it, then there are a number of other documents that I will attach, the ones that will be circulated to you, where we analyze how the council itself functions. The council said that this should be done, but the council itself doesn't respect this. So the council says you should make that there is a gender perspective in all the work you've done, in all policies, in all processes, and in all documents. But the council, when they're organizing events, they only take men. They forget that women exist. Or when women come, they sit, and when it comes to make a statement, a man comes from nowhere, he reads the statement 2 minutes, and then he leaves. So they do not follow the discussion, they do not intervene, they do not interact with others, and they do not let space for women to contribute. So this is part of my work, that is to tell the council, you are asking this thing to be done, you have to start doing it yourself. And we in the Office of the High Commissioner, we've started doing this since 2011. That's when I was made responsible of the section dealing with gender equality issues. So the first thing is that we conducted an internal audit, and that internal audit showed that there were two major problems in the Office of the High Commissioner. One was that there was no visibility on gender equality concerns. Number two is that even where there was some visibility, there was no linkages between the visibility and gender equality concerns and the policy that was adopted by the office. For example, the office would say when they are constituting a commission of inquiries, like there is one now on North Korea, The commission of inquiry would not put in the terms of reference that, first of all, it should be gender balance. Normally, they should say, okay, it's a commission of inquiry going into a country, so it should be gender balance. That is about 50-50 women and men. Number two, when you are describing or formulating the responsibilities, you should make sure that those who are going for that investigation also look into the type of problem that could specifically be affecting women. For example, if there are no hospitals, if there is no access to water and sanitation, we know men can, I'm sorry to say, but this is part of human rights. If I feel like peeing, I can just stand by the window and pee outside. You know, to the extreme, if I don't have a possibility. But a woman can't do that. So you have to make sure that you think of all those details that could make a difference. Just another example, last year I was giving a training in Qatar for head of field presences from my office in the Arab region. And then we were on the sixth floor, and you don't have toilets for women and men on the same floor. Women's toilets were down 2 floors below. We told them there are 2 toilets here for men. For the time that we are here, we want one of the toilets to be converted with the nameplate that it's for ladies. Because if one lady goes down 2 floors below and she is attacked, something happens to her, how do we know? So we want them to be at the same level so that if anything happens, someone can be there to witness or to assist or to help. So these are some of the details that you don't take into account. In the UN, we have some stupid rules which say if I'm traveling to a country, if I'm traveling, let's say, to South Africa, they're asking me to choose, according to my grade, to my rank, to choose the cheapest flight, business class, but the cheapest business. You know, you have many levels. You have the business full fare, you have the business flexi, and then you have the business where you can't change the dates, whatever happens. Because if you change the dates, you lose the ticket. I say, okay, it's not really a problem if the UN has problem with money. But sometimes it happens that those which have the cheapest are put on the flights which arrived very late in countries. So one of the things I did in the office is that women should not travel and arrive after 6 p.m. wherever they are going to. Because if they arrive after 6 p.m., that is 6 in the afternoon, it may be dark. They find themselves at the airport. They have to take a taxi. They don't know anybody. They don't know whether the taxi is a real one or a fake one. So we should always arrange that women who are traveling, they abide by the rules, but there are some exceptions. And the exception is that if any flight is even more expensive, then we'll put her on the expensive flight so that she doesn't arrive after 6 p.m. So these are exceptions that contribute to creating some form of equality. The same thing if we are organizing, I'm going to Panama, it's in Central America, at the end of the month to give a training to our colleagues in the Central and Latin America. But what we are doing is that there are 2 colleagues who have young children. If children are younger than 3 years old, we have to pay for a ticket for her to bring that baby. And where we are organizing the training course, I'm organizing for her to have babysitting for her baby while she's in the training. So these are things that you have to think of. And unfortunately, government don't do it. In the UN, we are the only ones to do it, whereas it should be done by all UN organizations because it is the same organization for, but they will tell you there isn't enough money, which is not true. There is always money. When you just have to make the decision, and if you want the decision to be implemented, then you have to put the money that goes with the decision that you've made. And one of the decisions is something that you are going to see. Maybe as you are not all lawyers, I thought maybe we should start. Okay, I've gone through part of the program that is already there because I prefer we go through examples so it allows you to understand better why and how certain things function in the UN or do not function and why they should be applied by member states and why is it that member states don't implement them. So there are some basic concepts like sex, gender, because when people say gender, what is the difference between sex and gender? Can someone say it? And please be assured there is no wrong answer. Because I'm sure all of you have a piece of the answer. So just say what it means to you. I just put a hint on the board, natural attribute. So what does it mean for you, the notion of sex?
Like a sex is a biological feature, like,
what you're born with.
Men have testosterone, facial hair, different stuff. But gender is like the cultural norms that goes with it. For example, girls usually wear sheilas where we come from, and like traditionally they stay home and take care of the kids. Like, but
Then that's a bad tradition.
yeah, no, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I
as an
understand.
example, not
I'm just
like-
jumping on it just to say that there are some traditions that are good, there are some which are less good. You can't say, in fact, they are not bad as such, but they are less good because even me, when I had children, when my wife had children, we agreed that she is a pediatrician. We agreed that she would stay at home. She wouldn't work for 10 years until our younger child is 10 years old before she start working. But it means a compensation. It means my salary had to be, well, after we have done all the expenditures for the house, what remained was divided into two. So it's a way of doing things. You have less resources, but at least everyone is happy in the, in the
I
couple.
don't think staying at home and taking care of your kids is a bad thing. It just depends on your
Yes,
situation.
yes.
Sometimes you need to because financial stuff.
And also and also in our society we men give actually not only half of their money, they don't separate half of it, maybe all of their money for the woman, and he just take a small amount.
No,
and
but
she's
some
sitting
things
in the
they
home.
share, not all of them.
Sometimes it depends on the woman.
No, I think she is right because, in fact, in my own case, it's my wife who had the account. In fact, at the end of it, I say, okay, can I have X amount? She said, well, in the amount there is only X. There isn't 10, but there is only 5. I say, okay, how much can I get? In most cases, it's in fact the women who manage the money because it is not because the women are powerful or the men are weak. It's because the women manage money in a wiser way. Because in fact, if it was open up to me, every time I stop at the bancomat, I'll just put the card in and then I will take 500 now, then 500 tomorrow. I don't count. Whereas my wife, she counts. She will say, okay, I remove X this day. I remove another amount this day. So there is only X and we are only half month go. So would it take us to the end of the month? Men don't think of that often. So it is important that where there is this type of flexibility, where the woman manages the resources, generally it works better because they know how to manage better. I've seen myself with my sister. I have 6 sisters. So I see how they manage their own resources in their families, and they are far better than my brothers in their own families. I'm lucky that my wife is controlling things because, for me personally, it's because I don't have time. I'm too much involved I want to change the world, so.
So it depends like on the background and your capabilities of doing such things.
Yes.
And your personality. Okay.
Yeah, most women know how to manage, even if they are not economists, They know how they feel it. Whereas most men, they just think the money wouldn't finish. No, they don't?
Not always.
Yeah,
Yes, I know there are a few exceptions, of course. I think I learned a lot being with my sisters than going to university. Yeah, because I grew up with 14 cousins, all women. And I was the youngest among my cousins, 14. Then my mother had 11 children, 5 boys and 6 girls. But it happens that I'm the first child, so I saw how the other grew up. And I also have now 2 daughters myself who are grown up. So I'm quite familiar. It's like a personal, I would say, commitment on my own side to make sure that what I saw in my family, the way my father treated my mother, the way my father treated my sisters, and my sisters are more successful than than my brothers. I'm probably the only boy who succeeded this far. Well, successful, I think it's something relative because, most of them, they all went to the university, but, a university degree is not enough. You have to be able to work and to be successful at work. Some people have a degree and they think that's the end of the process. The process is not ended too. So I think women tend to stay back for various reasons. Some are cultural, some may be religious, some may be environmental, some may be, personal, that is the character of the persons. But wherever women have engaged in activities, they have always shown to be more successful. There are many other things that I could have explained to you, but it would take too long because I'm working on a theme called organizational culture and gender equality. How do you make an institution to function in a way that women feel comfortable and make decisions with as much, psychological comfort as men? Because women and men have 2 different managerial approaches. Men manage for results, whereas women manage for cohesion. Women want people to be together, to feel involved in a decision that is going to be made. Whereas men, they are just looking and say, okay, I have to get there. Whether he has to step on his mother or his father, it doesn't matter, but he has to get there. So it is important to look at all those things. But I think now that as we discuss, I try to identify some of the gaps where I would have to include documents for your reading. And I encourage you to read those documents because they are very helpful, and you will realize that even not being lawyers helps to read some of those documents. So I'll put something on organizational culture.
You will send it to us, or you?
I'm going to send everything to the office because as they are the interface, so I'm going to send this PowerPoint presentation, send you the documents I showed you, send you those documents, that is the CEDAW conventions, because it's already on our website, but I know sometimes people are lazy to go and look for them. So I'll just copy it, put it with the pack of documents, send you the UN system-wide action plan. We'll get to it sometime not too far from now. And okay, so we've heard what is the definition of gender, of sex. So sex is a natural attribute. You born male, you born female. Probably you are not familiar that there are some people who born, they are not male or female, they are both. They are called the third sex, or hermaphrodites. Whereas gender is the way in which society attributes roles and responsibilities to men and women. There is another dimension of gender which is, that you all know, you maybe have heard of it. Well, not maybe, certainly you have heard of it. It's about sexual orientation and gender identity. It is something which is part of the global discussion on human rights. What I advise people is that you cannot refuse to discuss an issue if it is brought to you as a human rights issue. You may not agree with it. It is your right not to agree with it. But at least you can discuss, because you are not losing anything by discussing. In fact, I think when you discuss, you can make your position clearer. And while I was waiting there, I was discussing with the executive director. I indicated to him that 2 weeks ago I was briefing, I had a lecture with a group of students from the University of Glasgow in the UK. And one of them said, yeah, but what do you think that there should be sanctions against countries like Nigeria and Uganda who adopted law criminalizing same-sex relations? I said, first of all, you should understand that no country is perfect, and I would say even now that most countries are imperfect regarding the issue of gender identity and sexual orientation. One, it is something that hasn't been explained enough to people. Number two, it is not something that comes in naturally in the discussion. And then I said, for example, I gave many quotes, but there is one last quote that I gave them. I said, President Sarkozy of France, when he was still president, he was interviewed about the discussion in France on the issue of sexual orientation and gender identity. He said, gays, lesbians, bisexual, and transgender people, it is their freedom to do what they want to do with their body. This is their right. But the heterosexual don't go to the street to show that they are heterosexual. Why should they go to the street, two men or two women kissing on the street? Because they say you don't see normal people, two men. If they are young people, fine. But when you get to a certain age, you feel that it is not, appropriate to do that on the street. It's something meant for your privacy. Number two, and this is what he said, I don't want my children to grow up thinking that two men and two women can make a child, because it wouldn't be the reality. So you don't have to say, to reject it, as I see in some instances people reject and say, no, it's a Western thing. No, even in the Western world, there is a lot of disagreement on how to deal with the issue. But what I'm saying is that it's an issue you cannot avoid. You have to discuss it if it comes to you. If you are not interested, if you don't like it, you don't go to it. But if it comes to you, you have to make your own opinion and say, no, in my culture, it doesn't work that way because you believe it is A, B, C, D. So everything can be subjected to discussion. So don't feel shy if that issue comes, because I've had group of students from some places, like it was in Europe, University of Graz in Austria. They simply say, no, this for us, we will execute them if it came to our place. This is in Europe, and in Austria, that is what, 300 kilometers from Geneva. And these are students who are Europeans. So you see that if it is perceived that way in Europe, it means that it is something that is not widely that accepted. But I continue to maintain that it's a human rights issue because it relates to the human person. It relates to an individual. And anything that can affect a person psychologically or physically is important for us to be able to discuss, to protect. If we are not interested, if they are a threat, maybe we should find a way of how do we help them, how do we protect them, how do we convince them that the way they may be doing it is not conducive to making them being safe where they live. And one of the things that we've seen in recent years is that the influx of people seeking refugee status are people who use the argument of being harassed in their country because of their sexual orientation, because they know it is a cheap argument. Most Western countries would take it easily, and that's what's shown. And now they've discovered that in reality, people were abusing of it. You all followed the incident with Strauss-Kahn in New York, with the lady from Guinea. You know, this lady, she is from Guinea, and when she got to the US, she said that she had suffered female genital mutilation. And when the incident with Dominique Strauss-Kahn happened, she had to go through a certain number of tests by the medical and by the lawyers. They realized that, no, that's everything. She had everything, so nothing had been cut, which means that she lied just to have access to be able to go to the US. So there are a lot of games behind the scene on those issues. But there are issues that you should bear in mind, that they will be coming more and more. If you don't go to it, like in politics, you say if you are not an actor of politics, you'll become the subject of politics. That is, someone would use you to do the politics. So it's better you are the actor of the politics and say, no, I want the barrier here, rather than sitting behind and say, no, I'm not aware. You close your eyes. By the time you open your eyes, you are surrounded by things that you don't want. Any question on this? Now, maybe there is an important topic which is part of the title of the expository, which is called gender equality. What does gender equality mean to you?
Maybe gender equality is the equal role in the society, women and men.
Yes, that's part of it. That's one aspect of gender equality. That is equal role of men and women in society.
Maybe also, maybe in age.
No discrimination.
No discrimination.
Men and women are equal in front of the law and in workplaces.
Absolutely. So you gave one, equal treatment, equality before the law, and all of these have implications. Equality means what? It means equality of opportunities. That is, boys and girls should have the chance to go to school. They should have the chance to practice their faith. They should have the chance to not to be ill-treated. You said equality at work, for example. What was the other notion you said? Yeah, equality before the law means equal access. It means that the police should be trained to be objective. When a woman comes with a case, they don't just say, ha, 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 this is another one coming with some stories fabricated. Or some of them, they will say, okay, yeah, what did you say? He attempted to rape you, so what do I gain? I've seen situations where you go to complain to the police, and the police want to, not to rape you, but they want sexual favor to be able to, to process your file. So, I mean, this is this is something, unthought about. So you have to be conscious of all this. You at your level, yes, you can say, get away, or the person may not get away with it if they try it with you. But imagine someone coming from the countryside with no education, no training, maybe from, I would say, little resources, someone who is afraid of power, someone who, there are so many circumstances that may make people fragile. So if you imagine that all of us here, you and I, we represent less than 1% of the world population, which can walk on the street without being afraid that someone who is coming to cross you would harm you, or that someone could threaten you. 1%, we represent 1%. You go to bed without thinking, what will I eat tomorrow? And when you go to bed, it means you're already in the house. But there are many people who don't have a house. So can you imagine that 99% of the world population is living under stressful conditions?
No. There was a situation, I'm not sure where in Africa, but basically what happens is if the guy knows that the parents won't agree to marriage, he kidnaps the girl and rapes her. And in their culture, they can't go and complain to the police. And even when they do complain to the police will be like, okay, he married you, what's the problem? So it's like...
Yeah, this is a recent story, in fact. I don't remember the name, but I know there is one country where, I can't remember exactly which country. I know this has been happening in many countries, but this is something which happened recently, like I think it was last week, where in one country the situation arose like that. And is this the news of last week or this week, something of the sort?
I watched it years ago on a documentary.
Okay, so that's maybe, yeah. So it has happened in many places. Not only in Eastern Europe, this is something that a few countries that I don't want to name because it may be politically inappropriate, but incorrect. But there are many places including in Europe. I'm always referring to Europe because it is considered Europe is a standard of civilization. That's what they have made us to understand. But there are many areas where there is a lot they need to learn from others. And unfortunately, when I say we, those of us who are not initially from Europe, we don't put our voice sufficiently strong for them to understand. I'm saying wherever there is a controversial debate, I would go to the debate because I want to challenge them to see how far they can go. And more, many people who are non-Europeans of origin, like to go to have this type of interface with places where people think they know everything. So that's it. And there have been many cases where I go for a briefing, people see my name because my name is short, S-O-B. Then I come, I sit, then I tell them, I say, okay, should we start? Then I say, no, we are still waiting for the professor. I say, that professor, it's me. Do you have some other professor with this name? So it shows you how much the prejudice can be, And this is not that I'm going in a little place in my village. I've been going as senior visiting fellow at the Graduate Institute, which is just across the road. Then to the United States, to London, to Austria, to places. And they're always surprised. I say, where is your country of origin? I say, it's Cameroon. Do you know where it is on the map? Some would say, yes, I know it's somewhere in Africa. And they will start looking in Northern Africa, on the map. I say, no. Then if you don't know, don't ask where I'm from. So just consider you are here to learn and take notes. Sometimes you have to be rude because people, the way they ask is to say, how come you managed to live that deep poverty in your country and then you are here lecturing us? So you just have to make your position clear and assert your right because it's also a right to be respected. You cannot let people just have disrespect. You have the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, the Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, and the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women in Law and in Practice. These 4 mechanisms are the key mechanisms which are serviced or based in Geneva and which focus essentially on how to combat discrimination against women and to promote gender equality. Now, the UN SWAP, this is the new thing a la mode, I would say. The UN SWAP is the UN system-wide action plan on gender equality and the empowerment of women. It was adopted by a funny animal which is called the CEB, which is the Chief Executive Board for Coordination. It's a meeting which is made up of, are you familiar with the composition of the UN system? On top you have the Secretary General, you have a Deputy Secretary General, you had head of agency who are at the level of the USG Under Secretary General, then ASG is Assistant Secretary General. But this CEB, this measure was adopted by the meeting of the CAB, which is composed of the Secretary General, the Deputy Secretary General, all heads of agencies. It was adopted here in Geneva in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. And what is it? First of all, what does it say? The UN SWAP says two things. One, women and men are equal. Number two, we are all responsible for making sure that it happens. And for it to be concrete, the UN SWAP has developed 15 indicators. Are you familiar with the notion of indicators? Can someone tell me what an indicator is?
A way to measure things.
Progress, achievement, performance, maybe the health, education, the whole indicators.
What is an indicator? Yeah,
It's a measure of something.
absolutely. An indicator is a measure that
Okay.
is, it may be a measure in terms of benchmark, it may be a timeline, it may be a baseline for resource allocation, but it is a measure that allows you to see how much you are progressing or regressing in complying with the commitment that you have made. And in this case, the key issues on this is accountability. That is, everybody would have to show, not simply say I am responsible for making sure that gender equality happens where I work, but to show that based on these indicators, this is how it is happening. So when you would have visited the UN Women website, you'll see that there is a window called UN SWAP. Just visit that UN SWAP. You see the whole of that. I just forgot, maybe I would also attach the last paper on UN SWAP, because my office and my survey, we developed 8 of the 15 indicators because we were already familiar with developing indicators in human rights. So it was easy to translate them as applied to human rights to gender equality.
What are the indicators, like in general?
One of them is policy. How do you develop a policy that is conducive to gender equality? So in the policy, you would clearly indicate that women and men are equal, because if you don't say it, it's not automatic. People don't think it that way. I give another example. In Switzerland, when you say women and men are equal, what does it mean for Switzerland? It means that in Switzerland, with the current situation, if you and I, we have the same qualification, we go and ask for a job, you will be paid 15% less than me. There is no reason for that, because you are delivering the same type of work that I'm supposed to deliver. You are putting the same type of efforts, maybe more efforts. You are investing enough, the same type of energy. But because I'm a man and they think that I will be more present at the workplace, they tend to give me a little bonus. They won't give a salary, but they'll give under the form of bonuses. So they give bonus, say, okay, yeah, soon you will get married and you start having children and you wouldn't be following things properly. So why invest so much in you? Well, it's inappropriate. Now I'm in the process of developing another part of the work that is part of gender equality, is that there should be a way to compensate women who decide to give birth, because giving birth is a social function. If women were not giving birth, the population would not be renewed. It means at one point we'll all be old and the pension would collapse, because the pension depends on the people who contribute to the pension. When I retire, I'll be not getting what I contributed, but I'll be getting what my children will be contributing. Because while I was working for the past 30 years, I was contributing to other person's pensions. So that's why I say giving birth is a social function that should be recognized and compensated. So there is a discussion now to know, but how do you compensate it? Is it not a way, would it not discriminate those women who decide not to have children? I say, well, it's a choice. Some decide to have children, some decide not to have children. And most of the time they will tell you those who decide not to have children is because they want to focus on their career. I said, but there are very many successful women who have children. So how do you explain it? So it means the career cannot be an obstacle for people having children. It's a personal choice. No one is going to interfere in that choice. But if you make that choice, you know that every choice has consequences. And one of the consequences is that you wouldn't be recognized for contributing to renewing the population. As simple as that. So these are just some of the many ideas that are circulating, that are subjected to discussions now. Are you familiar with the CSW? the Commission on the Status of Women. It is based in New York, but it deals with women issues. It's only dealing with women's issues. So maybe I should put something on this also, CSW.
ليش تقولوا لا؟
شو ما حد قال شيء.
كركم زين.
Yes, can I have a translation of
No,
the comment?
I said maybe.
She said all of you don't know.
No, I said maybe we know it.
Yeah, maybe you know, so because sometimes you know it, but you don't know the same acronym.
Yes, maybe.
It may happen so, especially if you are doing political science. There are most of the things that are done in law, you know it. It's only the methodology which is different. Because I studied political science first before doing law. So I understand many things, and it's even better for you when you start with political science before doing law, because it allows you to read more philosophy, more history, more structural analysis, and many things that in law you don't do. In law, you are taught to interpret the instruments, whether in political science, you are taught how to analyze situations. So I can't say it is better or not better because I did both. But most of the time, I realize those students who have done some political science grab things easier and they have a better sense of analysis of situations. Okay, we've talked about the swap implementation. I shared part of this with you at the beginning when I reviewed how OACHA. Okay, this is one of the situations that may not be very comfortable. Let me get closer, because from there I don't see well. You see that there is a gender-based discrimination, and on the right-hand side, what we are trying to do is to achieve gender equality. How do you move from discrimination to equality? You have to do what you call gender integration. Any idea about what is gender integration or gender mainstreaming?
Like, see what's the problem?
Change the mentality. To create more.
The integration, maybe the gender integration, maybe see what's the problem. Try to analyze it and see what's the cause, effects, solutions.
Try to create a
Yeah.
more.
So one notion is gender analysis. Yes, you said.
Create a more integrated environment between men and women. More
An environment conducive to equality. Yes, that's one other aspect. It's a big field. I say there is nothing wrong, no wrong answer, because at your level you know all of these things, but you know it from different perspectives. You may know, parts of it, not all of it put together. So don't be shy to say what you know, because it helps others, and this is part of capacity building, that you feel comfortable when speaking in public. So it is not only about, when I go out with my colleagues, I don't speak. I let them speak because they are younger and they are female, so they tend to hide behind me. I say, no, you go there and you sit and you speak to people, because this is how you feel comfortable and you acquire authority. And one of the things is giving this capacity is what? Is by training like these ones. Because this is one of the few areas where, without spending too much energy, you heighten your profile. Because when you will fill your CV, you put training on ABC in Geneva, when people say, this is a good candidate, probably she knows about all those things. So it is important that people have a good opinion of what you are or who you are. At the same time, once they have that opinion, you should be able to talk to them with some assurance when you are faced with them. Because I'm sure some of you would want to work with the UN later, in the future. But working with UN means going through two things. One, a written test. Most of you would probably succeed the written test, but the interview is the toughest one, because you see excellent candidates. I'm just recruiting now one person in my office, and out of 18 candidates pre-selected who took the written part, 14 were successful. But I started the interviews not alone. I have a team. We are 3 of us, 2 women and myself, because I always make sure that the team is balanced. At least there should be at least one of each gender, at least one man and one woman. But if there are no other person, you take who is available. So it happens that I have 2 women in the panel and myself. And what happens is that you realize that those candidates who did so well in the written part, when it gets to the interview, they are very shy, they are afraid. You don't know whether they are afraid or they don't know. So it is important that you start, because this is an exercise for you. I'm not marking you. I may not see you after today or after you leave. So you shouldn't feel like constrained or as if you were threatened. The thing is that you should seize every opportunity to say what you know of the subject. And it's not even a bad thing to answer, even if you feel the answer is the wrong one, because, as I said, you only learn by mistakes. Most of the time, people learn by mistakes. So can someone take up now, we started talking about gender integration. You gave 3 areas of it. So gender integration is what? Let me just sum it up quickly. Gender integration is a method by which you make sure that you take into account the differences that women and men encounter when a decision is being implemented. So you have to have that in mind, that whenever you have a decision that is being made, you should think that when this decision is going to be implemented, how would it affect women and men differently? And if you feel it would affect more men or more women negatively, then you have to adjust your decision in such a way that there isn't too much damage for the group which would be, on the weaker end. And there is a box tool that you saw under. You see gender balance, gender sensitive language and image, gender responsive budgeting, and gender analysis. So we mentioned it. Gender responsive budgeting is very important because most of the time the politicians will take decisions and then they say, well, if resources are available, we'll see. No, there should be some basic budget allocated for all situations if you want to make sure that gender equality policy is achieved. Now, this is one other example to show how unequal we could be, even when in case situation of disaster. When you had this tsunami in Aceh, out of 5 victims, there were 4 women. Can someone tell me why so many women died in Aceh earthquake and tsunami?
Fragile.
Sorry?
Women are fragile.
No, maybe they
protect-
had kids and they had to
Yeah,
stay
they're protected
back to
Yeah.
help their kids.
You see, they stayed back to help the kids, yes?
But
And
also,
men
they are
right.
not trained to go to the sea and swim. That's the problem also.
They didn't learn, they had not taught them, because in those areas, women are not authorized to swim because you have to undress, and it is inappropriate to undress to swim, even with the swimming attire. So women generally, to avoid all those complications, they decide not to learn to, they decide that they don't learn to swim, or parents don't teach the girls to swim. The boys learn to swim because they go to fish with the parents at sea. So if they fall in the water, they should be able to swim and come back to the boat, where girls stay at home with the mothers. So you see all the income, women stayed at home, men were out in the forest. Normally the forest is in the mountains. Some who were at sea, they saw the tsunami coming, so they could go closer to some shore and then jump out of the boat, because before the tsunami, the water withdraws, and they know, because they go fishing, so they know all this in practice, that the tsunami is coming. So the water would leave and go far back as from usual, and maybe it would take about an hour or 2 before the real waves and the tsunami comes in. So in the meantime, men who know this, they leave the boats, they run away, and they don't run home to look for the family, they run to save their lives. So that's why you had so many women, and many women that were found dead in the water, they had all the long clothing, essentially most of them are Muslims, and even those who are not Muslims. In my own village, there are very few Muslims, but women tend to wear big gowns because it is more comfortable, it is hot, so with the big gown, air flows, and then it keeps them cooler. Whereas men tend to wear tight things because they go to the farm, and they need something which is close to the skin to protect them because if it is too big, a snake can easily slip into your trousers. Whereas if it is tight, there are many technical reasons and simple that makes women to be more exposed to some of these natural disasters than men. On gender sensitive reporting, this you will see it because these are simple questions. And this is the final thing, gender sensitive language. For example, I remember when I was young, they would I would hear my parents ask some of my sisters, what would we like to do? I said, I would like to be a policeman. Do you find any inconvenience in it when I
Yeah.
say a policeman? Yeah, what is it?
Because you say police, then man.
Okay.
Police officers are women.
Voila. So there are notions like that, like they used to say, including in the UN chairman. Yes, Madam Chairman. No, it's chairperson or chair lady or whatever, or chair, but not chairman to a woman. And, there are so many. So you have these notions where you use these concepts with a man. You can use it in a generic noun, like police officer, like chairperson, like whatever. The second thing is to associate men and women with certain professions, like housewife. But there are many men who stay at home. I have one of my sisters whose husband stays at home, who used to stay at home to keep children because she earned better revenue. So she used to work and the husband stayed at home. And this was their choice. So would you call him a houseman? No.
House husband.
No.
House husband.
He's just a house carer, someone who takes care of the house. You don't need to say housewife.
Stay home, dad.
Yeah.
Stay home, father.
The other thing is to avoid stereotyping. For example, last year, no, it was 2 years ago, the chairperson of the council issued an invitation. He said delegates and their wives are invited. Is it normal to say delegates and their wives?
Delegates can be women. Yeah.
Because the assumption is that delegates is something very important and only men can get to that position. So you see, even at the council, only in 2013, there were still such mistakes, which shows that there is a lot of work for you and for every one of us here to do. So we can imagine what may happen in your own administration when you go back home or wherever when you will be employed. So there is still a long way to go. And then finally, one of the things is to avoid associating women with the form of fragility, because the notion is that why women, the real answer is, oh, they are fragile. No. No one is fundamentally fragile. And there is a joke that one of my boss, who is a lady, in fact, like to use. When they talk of the weak sex, she says it doesn't make, but you are familiar with the notion of weak sex talking about women, no? Is it something familiar to you? They say the weaker sex.
But it's nice to say it.
No, in English it's different.
Okay, no, in Arabic it's way different.
But and that my boss, she's a woman. She said, yes, those who are talking about the weak sex, if there is anything to weak, it's rather men, because women cannot be weak because they are never strong. Meaning that their sex is never strong, so it cannot be weak. Just a play. She just played with the word, and in French it is very sarcastic. Le sexe faible. They say if anything can weaken, it is the male sex, not the women. So you see, there are many of those things that people just use without thinking much. And if you put it that way, many men like, oops, I didn't expect this type of reaction. So this is, or putting, at some point you would see, in some old documents, you see they say women, children, disabled, homeless, they put all of them in the same category, as if women were fundamentally meant to be within those weaker categories. So we use an expression which is called disempowered groups, because everybody is born, we are all born equal, but the circumstances in which we live may make us fragile and disempowered. That is, we lose our capacity to react to circumstances and, and assert our rights. So in that case, it is not about vulnerable groups, because the notion of vulnerability is something. Vulnerability means you are exposed to situations that makes you lose your capacity to act properly. And women are not born to be unable to act properly. Women are born like boys to act properly, but it is the circumstances. And there are many women who are quite, far more stronger than men. In fact, I think it's next week, ICT is hosting a meeting. I'm invited to speak on one panel. I saw that most women there are professor of nuclear physics, professor of space law, professor of space medicine, professor. Where these women exist, it's not fiction. It's not, it's not invented. So you should avoid, not we, you should avoid accepting or exposing yourself to this type of comment without reacting. You are not necessarily I'm not advising you to be violent in the reaction, but you should always say, we don't agree with it because we think A, B, C, D. And you have the arguments to say so and to put things in the proper perspective. And finally, on images, I think there is a lot to be done about images, because sometimes they will put images. You will see in training manuals, they always shows a man who is lecturing and women who are in this. This is the perfect thing for the machos, Whereas in my team, I make sure I always have I have a colleague who is lady. I hired her 3 years ago. She's perfect. When we arrive, she speaks. She is always the person to speak first, and then I intervene, from time to time, because we don't have the same experience. We don't have the same exposure to things. We don't have the same type of example to bring in. But I avoid having situations where you'll always see a male teaching and women being taught. And when you visit our website, you see that there are many images that show women in those situations. Like in that, my colleague, she is quite young, very small, very slender. But when you see her, she's speaking, you see huge men who are up there looking at her. She's down there, very small, but very efficient. So important, that's how you should be. You should feel empowered. And empowerment doesn't mean someone would give you the authority. You have to take the authority yourself, and you develop your capacity by feeling comfortable, by speaking with authority, meaning with self-confidence. So it's about how you trust yourself. And I think with doing political science is one of the areas where you learn to, to really learn how to get power. Power in a broader sense, that is the capacity to influence others' decisions. And if you don't do it, unfortunately, others who don't have the chance to be like you would even have less. So it is left for you now to see how you put yourself in a situation where people are like, oh, those one, they made a good choice by doing political science. Maybe we should have done it too. And then they come to you and say, okay, how do I, in my area, I'm doing medicine, I'm doing geography, I'm doing English, I'm doing languages. How do I make to present myself in such a good shape as you? I think we'll stop here, and I look forward to sending you documents, and I hope they'll be very useful. They'll be useful to you. So if you need any information from what we discussed, just contact the secretariat, and then, are you part of the secretariat or part of the team? So why are you sitting behind?
I'm just here to observe.
Oh, I see, okay. So we call this active observation, active observer. So you might have noticed that there are 3 persons who haven't spoken at all, at least 3, who have not even made a little effort. But I won't go into name anyone.
No, it's okay, name. We wanna know.
We want to know.
عشان تتكلم فيه.
Next time, go speak.
This is one of them. You didn't speak at all. We're just busy. At the end there also, at the beginning you said one thing and then you simply turned to the board.
Because you did not listen to me.
Really? But you had the chance. I said you should stop me if you feel I'm going fast, or if you don't understand, or if you want to ask a question. Oh, sorry.
Your glasses gives me a reflection. I don't know if you can see.
Probably. No, because, I think I have to take, more enhanced glasses next time. Sorry.
You know what was my thing that I would like to say?
And say it now, please.
The history, the name of history, which we all study, is
Yeah.
basically man.
His story.
Yes.
So I would like to quote it for you.
Yeah, it's good to know. Yeah.
ما فهم ما
There is
فهم
no
ما
her
فهم.
story.
Tara his HIS like him.
Yeah.
His story.
That is the story of,
A man.
man.
yeah.
Mankind.
They mean no. ما ف-
Yeah, it's a he story.
Yeah.
هذا بس مش مستانس.
See?
Okay, thank you for your attention, and I take good note of that. This is one I didn't know, so next time I'll use it in another context to show that I'm brilliant.
The past, you could say.
Yeah. No, I can remember the construct she made. But this is a good one. I think I'll include it in my lexicon. But the purpose of these things is to learn also, because I get a lot from those groups I lecture, especially for short periods like this, because people have various experiences, and I'm not necessarily exposed to those experiences. For the past 10 years, I've been working more with very small groups like candidates to PhD candidates, which is very little groups of people, and you discuss more about the technicalities of how to draft a thesis or how to conduct research. So you don't really know the story and whether it is history or, or her story.
Any questions of our speaker, ladies?
No,
Any disturbing question?
no.
I really liked when you talked about the language sensitivity, because I feel a lot of people don't know how much language really plays a role in the way you
Yes.
construct the world around you. So you say it, but you don't really pay attention, which I like that you included it in your
Yes.
presentation.
It's interesting.
That's why it is always good to start. I always start by warning that sometimes I'm going to be abrupt or rude or sound rude, because if people are warned, they know that you are not saying it by mistake or by habit. They know you do it, you say it on purpose because you want to achieve an end. And it is also good for you. Okay, this is also part of my previous job as advisor on foreign policy. Sometimes you would go to someone, as you say, you'll force a snake through, in the person's throat, knowing that it is painful, but you have to force it in a nice way so that the person thanks you before dying. Thank you.
Thank you.